As many of you saw the result of the photograph of me at Lafayette Square last week, that sparked a national debate about the role of the military in civil society. I should not have been there. My presence in that moment and in that environment created a perception of the military involved in domestic politics. As a commissioned, uniformed officer, it was a mistake that I have learned from.
Hi again, everyone. It's 5 o'clock in the East. It was a stunning moment for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, having to go on camera like he did there to apologize for his appearance in combat fatigues walking across Lafayette Square in Washington, D.C., alongside the ex-president, where protesters had just been forcefully removed, all for the ex-president to take a photo with a Bible in front of a church. But little did we know, Milley's issues with the former commander-in-chief would go so much deeper. Shocking new revelations obtained by NBC News from the book out next week called I Alone Can Fix It, Donald Trump's catastrophic final year, showcase a chairman of the Joint Chiefs concerned and fearful about what might happen in the waning days of the Trump administration. Carol Leonnig and Phil Rucker write this, quote, a student of history, Milley saw Trump as the classic authoritarian leader with nothing to lose. He described to aides that he kept having this stomach-churning feeling that some of the worrisome early stages of 20th century fascism in Germany were replaying in 21st century America. He saw parallels between Trump's rhetoric of election fraud and Adolf Hitler's insistence to his followers at the Nuremberg rallies that he was both a victim and their savior. This is a Reichstag moment, Milley told aides, the gospel of the Fuhrer. Unbelievable words coming from the nation's top military officer in the year 2021. He was worried our nation was on the brink of turning into Nazi Germany. Because as also detailed by authors Phil Rucker and Carol Leonnig in I Alone Can Fix It, it was not Trump's rhetoric alone that concerned Milley. It was Trump's supporters as well, troubling him to such an extent they only added to the frightening historical parallel. Here's an account from the same book from soon after November 14th. Legions of Trump supporters from across the country converged on Freedom Plaza, a couple blocks from the White House, for a rally protesting the election results. It was billed the Million MAGA March, although only tens of thousands attended. After attending a security briefing on November 10th about the Million MAGA March, Mark Milley told aides he feared this could be the modern American equivalent of brown shirts in the streets. Milley was referring to the paramilitary forces and stormtroopers that protected Nazi Party rallies in the 1920s and 1930s and enabled the rise of Adolf Hitler in Germany. At the same time, personnel changes at the Pentagon were also alarming Milley. And the night of that security briefing, the general spoke to a friend about his fears. Here's more from I Alone Can Fix It by Phil Rucker and Carol Leonnig. Quote, what they're trying to do here is overturn the government, Milley's friend told him, according to the account Milley shared with aides. Quote, this is all real, man. You are one of the few guys who are standing between us and some really bad stuff. According to the book, as Trump continued to push the big lie, Milley grew more anxious. He was so worried, in fact, that Trump would use the military in an attempted coup that he spoke to his closest deputies about preparing to guard against it and said, quote, they may try, but they're not going to effing succeed. The nation's top military officer, believing the nation was on the brink of an historic crisis, is where we start this hour with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Retired U.S. Army General Barry McCaffrey is here. He's a former National Security Council member, now lucky for us, an MSNBC military analyst. Also joining us, retired U.S. Navy Admiral James Stavridis, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander and author of the book 2034, a novel of the next world. And John Heilemann is back, NBC News and MSNBC national affairs analyst, host and executive producer of Showtime's The Circus, and host of the Hell and High Water podcast from The Recount. General McCaffrey, I start with you. Your reaction to this new and, if not thematically a departure, it is certainly a new detail to something we worried about a lot of different junctures over the last 4 years.
Well, Nicole, I was hearing much of this as a primary source during contemporary events. You know, you should back off this and just say, if you were a foreign intelligence officer looking at Trump's behavior during these last few months of the administration, what would you conclude? You'd have to assume he's edging toward conducting a coup against democracy. And a lot of people are unaware that the senior military leaders do not give orders to the armed forces. The President of the United States does, and the Secretary of Defense, they're the only ones authorized to command the 11 combatant commanders. And when Trump sacked Secretary Esper, a fairly distinguished guy, and put a White House flunky in there, many of us said, this guy is on the edge of trying to overturn the election of the President of the United States. So I think we ought to be grateful to this principled, tough-minded, beautifully educated, and experienced officer, Mark Milley. History is going to be pretty kind to him.
Admiral Stavridis, what do you think when you read about how concerned people at the highest levels of not just the military, but of the government were about what became very clear to all of them, Trump's anti-democratic aims and anti-democratic methods?
I'm with my mentor, General Barry McCaffrey. I, too, was in many ways a primary source in some of this. And I think what I can add best is I know Mark Milley extremely well. He served under my command as a 1-star, 2-star in Afghanistan when I was Supreme Allied Commander. Look, the guy looks like a bouncer in a Boston bar. He went to Princeton, where he was the captain of the hockey team. He is brilliant. He's well-read. And what a stand-up guy. When he made a mistake at Lafayette Park, and it was a bad mistake, he went on national television and effectively apologized to his forces. That's what we look for in a commander. That's what we look for in a senior military officer. So confronted with a shocking pattern of fact, which he was, as General McCaffrey points out correctly, he did the right thing, which is to gather his most senior officers and clearly lay out that they were not going to obey illegal, immoral, unethical orders like overturning a U.S. election. And they sketched out what they would do, which is the right thing to do, refuse to obey the orders and go public with it, put it in the hands of the Congress and the American people. So I'm with General McCaffrey. To me, this is the system working.
Let me put you both on the spot, and you may either not want to answer this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. General McCaffrey, should he have done more? If he saw Donald Trump acting, if he saw parallels between Trump's rhetoric of fraud and Hitler's insistence to his followers that he was their savior, if he really saw this as a moment with parallels to Nazi Germany, did he have an obligation to go to the oversight committees, the armed services committees in the House and the Senate?
Well, I think he did. He did go to the Senate. He did go to other sources of power. You know, he talked to the Secretary of State and others. I think he used great judgment. Look, at the end of the day, the chairman of the JCS, the service chiefs, the 4-star service chiefs, are still responsive to any legal order of the President of the United States. So they owe them a duty of loyalty and obedience, unless it's an illegal order. And even then, some of this, at that level of government, it's very tough to sort out where you stand on some of these issues. The President of the United States has enormous emergency powers to use the armed forces to declare insurrections and states of emergency. The only protection of the American people is to elect people to that office who have character, experience, and integrity. And in this case, we had a near criminal regime in charge of the U.S. government that was trying to overturn the election. So again, I think Mark Milley, he wasn't supposed to be on the Today Show announcing this. He was talking forcefully and directly to people like that Stephen Miller in the Oval Office and to the President of the United States. I don't know what else he could have done.
Admiral Stavridis, could there have been a scenario where insubordination took place? I mean, do you see this? Would the next step, the next sort of escalation have been an order that they refused to follow? And are you sure, I mean, in your read of everything that's public facing, does it appear to you that functionally Donald Trump was the commander-in-chief on January 6th?
But by law, he was the commander-in-chief on January 6th.
But functionally, I mean, there's no indication that he was in the chain of command and calling the National Guard. It's been reported that Pence did that. Milley has said he would ignore unlawful. I mean, was he functioning as commander-in-chief in those final weeks?
I think he was legally the commander-in-chief, and he was failing in those responsibilities utterly, would be the simple answer. And were we trending toward a moment of insubordination? I would call it a moment of conscience on the part of senior officers. Again, on this one, I think the system worked. And I agree with General McCaffrey once more. At the end of the day, the solution to this is electing officials who will guard the Constitution of the United States with their sacred honor. That is the mission here. The military can't deliver that. The American public must.